we've decided to know that's all right, our panel goes take away.
I'm Ray, as Josephine said, and when I think to introduce myself, I'm immediately like, well, what should I tell them about me? Well, you know, I'm like a writer, and I've just started a PhD, and I did this book, and I do this, you know, and it's interesting to me that the things that I think about to describe and introduce myself are almost entirely forms of work, and that's kind of what my talk is going to touch on, because once you step away from this is who I am as defined through my career, it's kind of difficult to know what you might say about yourself. So initially I titled this talk, How to Stay Sane When Everything is Shit. I think that the answer is that you can't, and I think that there are lots of interesting things to be said about the reasons why you can't stay sane when everything's shit. And I kind of want to talk about what it means to say that everything is shit, and to acknowledge negative mental health in response not just to individual problems or individual chemical imbalances, but to acknowledge that as a response to a set of social conditions. And I want to say that being sad and mad is pretty much the only reasonable response to the political climate we live in, particularly if you are structurally disadvantaged in varieties of ways, like, for example, as most of us in the room here are, by being young, by being female, by being poor, by being a person of colour, by being queer, or by being trans, and even more so, like, the more intersections you start building up. And I want to say that acknowledging and embracing mental ill health and refusing to stay sane, to perform, to be a productive member of society, can be a radical action and can be channeled more so into collective radical actions against capitalism, against any oppressive force that you might want to name. So before I properly begin, I want to caveat with 3 points. Number one is that I say mental illness a lot, or words like disorder or whatever, just because that is the terminology that we have, not because I actually think that being mentally unwell is like being ill or being diseased, or really that I think it's anything negative at all. I think there's a kind of poverty of language around that, but I will be forced to use that. Which links to the second point, which is that everybody has mental health. And I think sometimes we don't realise that. You sort of talk about mental health as like, oh, this person has like mental health because they're ill, but everyone has mental health, and so having bad mental health is not something that's like happening over there somewhere, it's something that's happening to all of us. The third caveat is that some parts of this may be triggering. I guess I can't trigger warning for everything that might possibly come up, but things that I think might be problematic or triggering in it are discussions of anxiety, discussions of suicidal ideation briefly. So just a warning for that, and if anybody feels like they would like to leave, then please go, and I won't be offended. So, there are 4 arguments that I would like to make that come under this discussion of how to stay sane when everything is shit. Number 1, as we live at the moment in this neoliberal, neo-fascist, capitalist society, whatever you want to call it, being a good person is made the same as having a good career. We are identified with our work. But capitalism means that most of us will fail at work. We will not accede to the highest echelons of the 1%. That is how capitalism is structured. It's so that some people are rich and the majority of people are poor. So we're set up to fail. Number 2, there is a social and cultural imperative to stay sane. We are told that we have to cope, we have to be productive members of society, we have to be getting on. And then that means that all discussions of mental health are made to refer back to work. Number 3, and this is kind of my key point, I think under these conditions, refusing to stay sane is the only thing that we can do. And we have to speak up about feeling shit. We have to speak up together about mental ill health. And I don't think I'll get on to point 4 because of time, but I have lots of feelings about what it would mean to form a collective community of care as a response to the situation that we're in, and I would really like to talk about that at some point in the evening if we can, because this is the point of my talk that I'm a bit okay, and then where do we go, and talking about that is, I think, the really interesting thing. So point number 1, successful person equals successful career. We define ourselves through our work. In the UK and everywhere pretty much, as I've said, when you say hey to a person, you're like, so what do you do? And finding alternatives is challenging. So sometimes I experiment with being I don't really do anything. Or I try and do as little as possible. Or anything that allows me to sleep in and not have to get up and go to an office. And people are kind of shocked by this sometimes, even in quite politically engaged circles, they'll be oh really? You're not gonna get up and do some activism, or like, be a bit more productive. And I think that's interesting. It's taboo to say that you don't work, or it's taboo to say that you don't want to work. And if we are living at the end of this neoliberal period, which is kind of interestingly gradually changing to more of a neo-fascism, it's still true that neoliberalism has had this impact on work, making it an unquestionable public good. However mundane, however drudging, however boring, politicians talk about hardworking families all the time, and this is a kind of buzz phrase that you're not supposed to question, even as work pays less and less. And capitalism hits the huge majority of people, particularly migrants, people of colour, working class people, people that are economically poor, trans people, queer people, and young people. And the government knows, they know that they can get away with stripping back things for young people because we don't have power as a voting bloc. For example, I think something really frightening that has just happened is that they have announced cuts to housing benefits for under 21s, as probably most of you know. And they've been talking about this for the last couple of years, and they've just put this through. And literally the impact of this is that young people will be homeless. It doesn't save them any money. The government target young people, and particularly they target young people who don't have access to work. And so if you're in one of these groups, you're at much higher risk of mental health, not because you have some sort of thing wrong with your brain, but because you're literally being besieged by politics, by society, by the shit that people are throwing. And so what happens is that competition is built into our mentalities in order to try and avoid being put in this position of person who is not working, like scrounger, skiver. We're supposed to compete for not enough jobs to go around. Competition is constantly reiterated as good, effectiveness must be maximised, output must be maximised, and at the same time everyone is looking for ways not to feel sad and to make our lives better in an economy that turns on the majority of people doing jobs that are just kind of shit. And so if any of you have spent much time in the job centre claiming job seekers allowance, I don't know if you have, it is one of the worst places in the world. Under 25s I think currently get £57.90 a week, and over 25s get £73.10 a week, and that is clearly not enough to live on. And I think that the job centre can be seen as a kind of a microcosm for this broader picture of a society in which personhood is equated with work. It builds mistrust into politics as a matter of course. At the job centre there are these arbitrary regulations, there are these arbitrary sanctions. Job centre staff have to meet quotas for sanctioning people so that they won't get their benefits. I remember I spent quite a bit of time in job seekers allowance, so I'm speaking from personal experience. And I remember once missing on a signing on appointment. I think that something stupid had happened, like the bus had gone in the wrong direction, or I got the wrong day, and I went in and I said, "I'm really sorry, I've missed my appointment, I made a mistake." And they were like, "Right, fine, sanction for a month." And that's it, you're a month of money down. Moving on to the second point, there is a social and cultural imperative to stay sane and to keep quiet if we're mentally unwell. And I'm kind of interested in what we were saying just before about how maybe there's something changing about this. Maybe more people are now beginning to talk about mental health. But I think that politically there is still a kind of mandate from on high to keep quiet about it and to kind of individually retreat if you are unwell, to focus on getting better so that you can go back to work. And what the labour market does is to individualise pain, and it hides the impact of social political conditions on how we feel. We're supposed to cope perfectly, outwardly at least, and if you aren't coping, you're broken, and that's your problem. I think this is a deliberate political strategy. I think that politicians, people who stand to make lots of money, want us to be too broken to organise against them. I think that the cuts to the NHS are no coincidence. Obviously there's something larger going on about an ideology of wanting to privatise, but there's also something going on about wanting to keep people desperately looking for work, desperately trying to cope with the things that are going on in their lives, because people who are desperate and sick and poor don't have the ability to collectively organise and go out onto the streets. There's this guy called Bruce Levine, who is a psychologist, who I think put it really well when he said, "We have been increasingly socialised to equate inattention, anger, anxiety and immobilising despair with a medical condition, and to seek medical treatment rather than political remedies. What better way to maintain the status quo than to view inattention, anger, anxiety and depression as biochemical problems of those who are mentally ill rather than normal reactions to an increasingly authoritarian society. So I have some stats which are maybe not quite as detailed as the ones we were just given out, but I think that they are very telling. One is from the World Health Organization, which says that over 450 million people globally have a mental health issue. And that's just the people we know about, right? And in the UK, 1 in 4 adults has a diagnosable mental health condition during the course of a year, which is 25% of the population. So this is like something that is targeting a significant minority, and I think this is like probably also an underestimation, because a lot of people don't talk about how they're feeling, and a lot of people may not necessarily see feeling sad a lot of the time as like a thing to give a label and go to the doctor about and talk to other people about. So there's a lot of private suffering happening even before you get to the point where mental health conditions are reported. And through all of this, despite how many people are affected by this, mental health is something that most people don't understand. We don't talk about it, we just kind of hope that we're not affected by it. One way in which the government deals with mental health conditions is to offer cognitive behavioural therapy. Like probably those of you who are involved in the medical industries know about this. So if you are ill, if you're depressed or anxious or facing some sort of mental health problem, you might go to the doctor and say, I'm feeling depressed. And what they will give you, as well as like, here, take these pills, take these antidepressants, is you can sign up for six what's the word for a single session? That's it. 6 sessions of cognitive behavioural therapy. And this is really important. It's really important that they offer cognitive behavioural therapy rather than any other kind of talking therapy, because what CBT does is to teach you coping strategies to deal with what you're facing. And what that does is enables you to go back to work. So it's not necessarily tackling the underlying root of whatever you're dealing with. It's saying, here's a selection of things you can do, exercises that you can do, so that you can kind of put your pain over there and come back and be a productive member of the workforce. So what this does is creates better, more contented workers, and it maximises profitability. It has nothing to do with national well-being. It has everything to do with capital, and it individualises, again, mental ill health when actually the causes are largely structural. Another point that I think it's really important to stress is that mental ill health is obviously, as well as being a really big thing for young people, it's classed, it's racialised. So my argument is to do with embracing madness and refusing to stay sane, but that refusal and embracing is an intersectional refusing and embracing. Mental ill health in poor people and people of colour, particularly black people, is treated as criminality, as people in this room will know better than I do. This criminality is to be punished with prison, unlike mental ill health in richer white people who may be seen as like, you know, eccentric and like given a bit of a long leash. And so what this means is that the stakes are different for claiming insanity, and that owning madness and mental ill health has to be done intersectionally with an attention to the differing consequences. Refusing to stay sane is a radical action. This is like a brief bit about me before I start. I think I have struggled with bad mental health for most of my life, but when I had graduated from uni, I was unemployed, I couldn't get a job. I had a kind of like a co-occurrence of many bad things that happened all at the same time. Like I had to move back in with my parents, with whom I don't have a relationship. I was coming to an understanding of myself as a trans person. I had a breakup with a significant partner. All this stuff happened at once, and I had what I later found out was a mental breakdown. And I wanted to bring this up partially to stress the embodiedness of mental health, because the supposed distinction between mental and physical illness is like totally a misnomer. When you're mentally ill, you feel it in your whole body, just as if you were physically ill. And perhaps in some ways it's worse because your mind is also completely fucked. And I was so anxious for about maybe a year, maybe 2 years, that I was not able to function. I don't eat when I'm anxious, I don't sleep. I'm like often vomiting, I'm like shitting everything out. My heart is like feeling nauseous all the time, my stomach is tight and churning. I'm sweating, I can't concentrate on anything except being anxious. I can't hear people talking. I'm like obsessively ruminating, you know, like thoughts going around like this. And this is something that completely changes how you're able to live your life. You can't go and look for work when you're that ill. It's not possible. The whole state path for dealing with mental ill health completely fails to take into account people's individualities and embodiednesses, and how mental health is not a thing that you can just like make a list about sometimes, but it's something that you have to be ill with and that you have to sit with and have time for. And so, kind of moving out of that, I want to suggest that talking about mental ill health is a radical action. I want to suggest that embracing this, acknowledging it, refusing to deny that it happens is a thing that we need to do, and that we need to talk to each other about it. I mostly live in a queer and trans household where we try and live intentionally, and part of what we do a lot is sitting and talking about our health, our feelings, our emotions, sharing them with each other and trying to work out ways to care for each other when the other people that we're caring for may also be struggling. And I imagine that's something that some people here can relate to, and it would be interesting to hear how you guys feel about it. So I guess maybe just to finish, let's say that things are not okay when they're not okay. Let's acknowledge that we all have mental health and that we all have mental ill health. Let's talk about our mental ill health together. Let's try and stop competing with each other, even though capitalism tells us that we have to do that all the fucking time. And let's try to build communities of care, whatever that might mean. Great. Yeah, thank you to both the points about CBT. I think that is like a really useful reminder for me to be like subtle in what I say and to not make sweeping denunciations, even though I love to make a sweeping denunciation. But yeah, I am like, I think like politically I am down on CBT and I am down on meds, but having said that, like I have used CBT and I take meds, and I think that it's like really legit and really cool for everybody to use whatever mechanisms make them feel better. And I think that we should all do that, and there should be no shame in doing that. So like, please do not go away thinking I've been like, shouldn't do that, because that's like literally the opposite of what I'm saying. I guess the point about CBT that I'm trying to make, and that I'm making in a crude way, is that there is a specificity to why the government picks CBT rather than say like psychoanalysis or like psychodynamic therapy. Because those kinds of talking therapies are long and they take lots and lots of sessions. They make you worse before they make you better. They may not make you better, like none of this stuff may make you better. And so CBT is like picked for the reason that it can offer the techniques to get you better as you can be, a bit more stable quickly. And I think there's something political to say about that. But then having said that, as you say, CBT does really good things. And I've like definitely found it helpful in terms of like understanding some of the ways that my anxiety works and in kind of trying to combat some of those things. And I think I'm still kind of trying to think about how to analyse that, because it is true that like women are differentially affected, and that there's a massive rate of mental ill health in women, and that women are subject to like, you know, misogyny and patriarchy, and that is all affecting women. But at the same time, there's this high suicide rate in men, and men are socialised not to talk about their feelings and really struggle because of that and really keep it all inside. And I guess there's something about trying to, being nuanced in what we say, in what I say, and in holding those things together that might seem a bit like in tension or a bit complicated. I guess I was wondering if people in the room had thoughts on the point about like intersections in claiming mental ill health. Like, so you were saying about like men of colour. I think there's a stat which I don't have at the top of my head, which is that people of colour are much more likely to be diagnosed with like a psychosis-based mental illness. And I think that there's a question there about like, are people of colour more likely to have psychotic mental illnesses rather than neurotic mental illnesses, or is it like that mental ill health in people of colour is seen as crazy in a way that it's not in white people, and is that the reason for that higher rate of diagnosis? or is it like the differential pressures, or and like then I guess that greater likelihood of like being seen as crazy is also linked to the point about being seen as criminal.